The gut is a tube. It's about 30 foot long. It starts at the mouth and it finishes at the anus. Now, the first 25 foot of that gut should be near sterile. It should be near sterile. I mean, no surface in the world is perfectly sterile. It should be near sterile for the business of digesting meat and fat and, yes, absorbing some carbohydrates. The last 5 foot of gut, that's where the microbiome lives. And that's a different kettle of fish. That's a vegetarian gut. That is full of microbes, 1 or maybe 2 kilograms of microbes. And there they ferment fiber that comes from food, and they do much good for the body. I think my personal guess is that the most important function of the microbiome is to program the immune system, to teach the immune system what are the friendly bugs, the good bugs that it can ignore, what are the bad bugs it needs to react against. But it does much other good as well. It ferments fiber to produce short-chain fatty acids or ketones, which are a vital fuel for our body. It produces many vitamins and minerals, particularly vitamin K is very important. It produces neurotransmitters, which are essential for normal gut function. So it does much good for us. In fact, it's been thought of as another organ of the body, and that's how it should be considered. In fact, if you have mice that are reared in an entirely sterile environment, so that they never develop a proper microbiome, they are not healthy mice and they die young. So looking after our microbiome is as important as looking after our skin, our nails, our hair, everything else. The upper fermenting gut results when that first 25 feet of gut becomes colonized with bacteria, with yeast, and maybe other microbes as well. Now, what happens then? Well, many things happen. The first thing that happens is those microbes sit in the lining of the gut and they cause inflammation there. And where you get inflammation, you get leaky gut. And leaky gut is a disaster. The second thing that happens is foods, instead of nourishing you and making you, providing fuel for you and vital micronutrients, they nourish the microbes instead. And those microbes start to ferment. And when they ferment, they produce all sorts of nasty toxins. Now, we've touched on one, which is ethyl alcohol. So when yeast ferments sugars, you get ethyl alcohol. But when bacteria and yeast and other microbes ferment other foods, you get propyl alcohol, butyl alcohols, ammoniacal compounds, D-lactate, hydrogen sulfide, all sorts of nasty toxins. Now, these have to be dealt with by the liver. The liver is an extraordinary sorting house. So the blood that comes from the gut, it all flows directly to the liver via the portal vein, and the liver sorts out this toxic soup. It pulls out the good things that it needs to nourish us, energy, protein, fat, vitamins, and it detoxifies all those nasty things that we can do without. If it didn't detoxify those things, if those things went straight into the systemic bloodstream, we would be unconscious in a few minutes. They are that nasty and toxic. But the business of doing that is enormously demanding of energy. So if you're consuming a vast, if you've got a lot of toxins coming into the gut, that drains our energy. Now, I see lots of people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and the people with chronic fatigue syndrome, they've got a rather small energy bucket. They don't have the energy that they need in order to function well. And if they're consuming lots of toxic foods, and the liver is having to use that energy, to deal with those, then you're going to end up with less energy. It's going to make you fatigued. So having an upper fermenting gut is a major source of fatigue and foggy brain. If those toxins get into the brain, just like alcohol, it gives you a foggy brain. That's the first big problem. A second major problem is that those microorganisms are as hungry for vitamins and minerals as you and I are. So people taking nutritional supplements when they've got a fermenting upper gut, just feed the fermenters. Obviously, some will get into the bloodstream, but not much. It's a waste of money. But I think a third major thing that is barely recognized by the conventional doctors are the microbes themselves. Look at life from the point of view of a bacteria or a yeast in your gut. Having found a nice home for itself, it doesn't want anybody else moving in there. It wants to keep that little ecological space safe for itself. And it does that by producing toxins to kill other microbes. So yeast will produce a whole range of mycotoxins. In fact, many antibiotics that we use are mycotoxins, and they have fungal names like penicillin, cephalosporins, erythromycin, streptomycin. mycin. These are all fungal names. The bacteria themselves, they produce bacterial endotoxin, and we know those endotoxins can be very nasty indeed. And then the microbes themselves cause a problem because we know they get from the gut into the bloodstream. It's called microbial translocation. Everybody will know about this because if anybody has a heart problem, if they go to the dentist, they have to take antibiotics before they have any treatment. Why? Because microbes in the mouth, you can detect them in the bloodstream seconds, minutes after you've had any dental procedure, and that includes brushing your teeth. So these microbes get into the bloodstream, and because they're not evolutionarily correct microbes, because the immune system hasn't been looking at these microbes for hundreds of thousands of years, it thinks they're foreigners. And that drives inflammation wherever those microbes end up. So if they end up in the muscles, muscle pain and fibromyalgia. If they end up in the joints, joint pain and arthritis. In fact, we know many inflammatory arthritides are driven by gut bacteria. If they get into the gut lining of the gut, you can drive inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. If they get stuck in the skin, chronic urticaria. In the brain, psychosis, that's a really interesting one. In the lungs, intrinsic asthma. In the kidneys, kidney disease. They drive much pathology. So keeping the upper fermenting gut at bay, preventing these microbes colonizing is a very, very important part of staying well.